I'm Michael Schachter, President of the Carolina Nature Coalition, and I'm glad to see people here, and there might be people online too. There's someone online, all right, and maybe more will be showing up. I want to thank a couple of people and institutions. I will thank Public Radio East for putting us on the calendar. And I want to thank, of course, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for our venue here. It's great. We can do both in person and online, so it's wonderful. We can have a hybrid, which is one reason we're happy to be here. I definitely want to thank Tom Shoup, who's our technical person, and also our secretary of the Carolina Nature Coalition. I want to also thank Stephanie, who's the true tech guru. And I want to thank my wife, Melissa, for setting up the snacks over there. And there's also T-shirts. I just like this over here, so you want to. The Carolina Nature Coalition has been putting on these events for over 13 years, pretty much every month for over 13 years. And we get no money from corporations or grants. We only get money from the people who want the people who come and like what we do. So if you like what we do, there's a donation jar over there, and you can give us a donation. Or if you go home and you think about it, you can go on our website, which is, of course, carolinanaturecoalition.org, and there's actually a donation button. So either way, in the past, we did a presentation on New Bern City Water in the past, but it was a long time ago. And so we figured that we better update it and see what's happening. So we're very happy to be able to do this today. Our presenter, Jordan Hughes, is a graduate of North Carolina State University, one of our great universities, with a degree in civil engineering and is a licensed professional engineer in North Carolina. He has had more than 20 years' experience working with the City of New Bern Water Resources Department, where his work has focused on water and sewer utility operations, infrastructure improvements, regulatory compliance, and long-term system planning. In his role as Director of Water Resources, Jordan has been involved in supporting the safe, reliable delivery of drinking water and wastewater services to the New Bern community. And so, without ado, Jordan.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right, thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. As Michael mentioned, we gave a presentation many years ago, just giving a brief overview of what New Bern does in the way of water production and wastewater treatment, and it's been quite a while, so we thought it'd be a good idea to come back and talk to the group, just give a refresher kind of on where our water comes from, what do we do to treat it, and also some things that may be kind of emerging issues for New Bern, things we're looking at or kind of I've got some focus on for the future. So we titled the presentation tonight, How Safe is New Bern's Water? And that's a valid question, and I get that question quite a bit. Probably once or twice a month, I'll have somebody call and have some type of water quality question, or just plainly will ask, is the city's water safe to drink? So what we're going to try to touch on tonight at a very high level is, where do we get our water from? What are we doing to treat it? How are we monitoring that and make sure we're getting a consistent, high quality product to our customer base? And we're also touch on some things that you may see in the news in the not too distant future, some things like PFAS issues or lead and copper issues. If you watch some state news or national news, you'll see those terms thrown around as it relates to drinking water. We'll touch on a little bit of how that impacts New Bern and what it means for us here. So as I mentioned, just a quick overview, a roadmap of what we're going to talk about tonight. We'll start with our water supply. We'll go into our water treatment, talk about what we're doing in way of monitoring, touch on lead and copper issues, and lastly, touch on emerging contaminants, and mostly talk about PFAS and PFOA and how that impacts New Bern's water supplies and what that means to you as a New Bern water customer. And I work really well on a Q&A basis, so anywhere along the presentation, please don't hesitate. If you have a question, just ask. I'd be love to answer. If it's something sparks an interest, stop me in my tracks, and we'll go down that rabbit hole together and see if we can figure it out for you. All right, so New Bern Water Resources, just kind of a snapshot of who we are by the numbers. We currently serve over 21,000 customers in New Bern and the surrounding areas. That's everybody in the city limits of New Bern, everybody in the city limits of Trent Woods. We also have some pretty large customer bases in the Rocky Run area, as well in the West New Bern area that are just in unincorporated portions of Craven County. Currently takes about $33 million a year to run our water resources divisions. This is a combination of our water and wastewater. Water makes up about 15 million of that 33 million. Over last year, we produced 8.36 million gallons a day for a total of 1.41 billion gallons of water used in the New Bern community in 2025. We get water from 2 water supply sources through 20 production wells, and we currently have the capacity to produce 7.63 million gallons of water a day. If you kind of look right above that, you'll see that our current usage is about half of what we have the capability to produce daily, which is a good thing. That means we're only about 50% capacity. So we can essentially double the size of our customer base, double the size of our distribution system, and still have enough water to meet the demand from the community. We have to go through a planning effort every year as required by one of our operational permits called a local water supply plan, where we look at our water supply and we look at our projected demands in 10-year increments. That runs through 2070 at this point. We just wrapped up that exercise back in March, and we ran the projections through the year 2070, and happy to say that we actually are still under our demand limits all the way through 2070. We're at 98%, but the New Bern water supply will meet the demand from the community for many years to come without significant need for additional water supply. That's a good thing. There's a lot of systems that are having, water demand issues. They're having water scarcity. So to know that we've got a very stable water supply source for the New Bern community is a huge benefit for growth and development of the area. Once we're done treating that water, it goes to 9 water storage tanks. We have the capability of storing just under 10 million gallons of water. When it leaves the tanks, we run it through over 350 miles of distribution piping on the way from the treatment plants and the storage tanks to the customers' homes or the businesses. It also takes 81 dedicated professionals to make this happen, from supply to treatment to distribution. And we've been in the business a long time. New Bern's been in the water business for over 130 years. We're one of the oldest water systems in the state, and we've been doing this for quite a while. All right, so it all starts with our supply. Where does our water come from? I get the question fairly regularly, do we get our water from the Trent River or do we get our water from the Neuse River? Well, the answer is neither. We are 100% groundwater sourced. All of our water comes from groundwater wells. We have 2 separate supply sources in that groundwater system, meaning we get it from 2 different aquifers. We've got 5 production wells in the Black Creek Aquifer, which is pretty far west, about 15 miles west of town in Cove City. If you're familiar where Cove City is at, the wells are in the Cove City area. Then we have 15 production wells that are down in the Castle Hayne Aquifer. So much shallower aquifer. You can't produce as much getting those out. So we've got 15 there versus 5 in the Black Creek. The diagram up there gives you a pretty good general idea of what the aquifer system looks like in this area. You've got many layers of confining layers and water layers and aquifers, and they're all kind of sandwiched in there as you go down through various depths. The best way I know to describe it is you take a a loaf of bread and stack it on its end. You've got slice it and put butter between each slice of bread. Your confining layers would be your bread, the aquifers, the water we're looking for, that's the butter. That's the good stuff. And so we're trying to get the butter out of all those layers of bread. The further down you go, the older the water gets, and how I say older, the longer it's taken to reach that level, going through those different confining layers, going through the different stone layers and sediment layers, act as a natural filter. So the deeper you go, the better the water quality is. Our water from the Black Creek, our wells there are 825 to 900 foot deep. Very high quality water, requires almost no treatment to send it to the customer. Our Castle Hayne wells are quite a bit shallower. They're in the 225 to 300 foot range. They require running through the treatment plant before we can send that water to the customer base. So big difference in the two, and really the difference is just the depth and the amount of time it's taken to get through those various confining layers that act like natural filters. And when we talk about water age in our aquifers, we don't talk about months or years even, or decades. The water age in the Black Creek, we talk of thousands of years or tens of thousands of years for water to get down that deep. So it takes quite a while for all that water to get to those levels, which makes it very high quality and being able to get through all the sedimentation layers. All right, so as I mentioned, our Black Creek aquifer, we got 5 wells in the Black Creek. They're over in Cove City. Very high quality water. We can go from the wells straight to the distribution system. Nothing's needed in between other than disinfectant. We do add disinfectant to those as they come out of the wells. We send it straight to the customer base. It's a wonderful product. It's such a great product that for many years, everybody in the area was drawing off of that aquifer. From about a 15 county area, there was about 20 water systems that were drawing from the Black Creek aquifer. What happened is they started noticing levels declining in the well, in the aquifer. So the pumping levels in the wells started declining. So about the year 2000, the state decided that they needed to intervene and do something, and came up with the Central Coastal Plains Capacity Use Area. It's a mouthful. And what that is a group of water users in that 15 county area that were drawing from those Cretaceous wells. And they came up with a plan to reduce the withdrawal in hopes of stabilizing the aquifer levels. They needed to stop declining and get to a stable point. So they came up with the Central Coastal Plains Capacity Use Area rules. And essentially, what that did is required everybody that was withdrawing water from those aquifers to reduce their withdrawals over a period of time. They gave everybody an approved base rate. Our approved base rate at the time was 4.2 million gallons a day. So that was just about what we're using at the time. And then we had scheduled withdrawals. By the year 2008, we had to reduce our withdrawals by 25%, by 50% in 2013, and by 75% in 2018. So our permitted level we could withdraw those aquifers was going to go from 4.2 to 3.2 to 2.1 to ultimately 1.1. And everybody else that was in withdrawing water had the same circumstances. Fortunately for us and all the other users, once we started making the improvements and finding additional water supply sources and we started reducing our withdrawals from the aquifer, the aquifer rebounded better than anybody projected, the models have projected. So once we essentially got to the 50% reduction level, we saw a tremendous rebound in the aquifer. And the graph you see there on the left, the blue line represents the water levels in the aquifer. And you can kind of see it on the far left is 2002. So it's a slight decline from 2002 to about 2008, 2010. That's when everybody started making alternative improvements and finding different supply sources. And you can see that blue line really shot up after 2010. That's when you start seeing the recover in that aquifer, and it's been very stable. Not only stable, it's continuing to improve. So the good news for us is that we're able to stop at that 50% level. It didn't have to make additional reductions. So we're currently running at 50% of our approved base rate, which is about 2.1 million gallons a day. And that's important for us because that's our low-cost, high-quality water. We want as much of that as we can get, and we make up the rest of it with our water treatment plant every day. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just wanted to be sure I understood something. When you were talking about having to reduce how much was taken from the,
Can you wait a second? When you ask, when you ask a question, wait for the microphone so that the people online can hear it, and also it's recorded.
I wanted to just clarify a little bit when you said that you had to reduce the amount of water that was drawn from the aquifer we'd been using, and that was done by other sources. Water. What are those? What is that? What are the other sources?
Excellent question. Excellent question. And it couldn't be more on time. So our other sources, we had to find a way to replace that water we could not withdraw from the Black Creek aquifer anymore. Different water systems came up with different plans. A little further to the west, they started making surface water withdrawals out of the Neuse River and the Pamlico River. So Greenville with GUC, Nowassa in Lenore County, they started making with surface water withdrawals. As you get a little closer to the coast, that's unrealistic for us. So we basically found another groundwater source. We drilled 15 Castlehane wells, which is a shallower aquifer. A lot more water in it. It doesn't have the demand on it. It's not as high quality, so it requires additional treatment before we can send it to customers. But development of our Castlehane water field or our well field was the New Bern's alternative, and construction of our water treatment plant in 2010. So we got the 15 wells in Castlehane, which is a lower quality water, requires treatment prior to sending customers, but it does make up that difference for us every day. So what we're trying to do today to maximize quality and minimize cost to the customer, we pump as much of the high quality, low cost water as we can every day from the Black Creek aquifer, and then we make up the difference with the Castlehane. And right now it's honestly about a 50-50 blend, because we can get about 2 million out of the Black Creek, and we run just about 4 million gallons a day, so it's pretty much a 50-50 blend. It's very fortunate that we do have the 2 independent well fields and the 2 independent supply sources. If something catastrophic were to happen, let's say we had a tornado tomorrow run through our water treatment plant and wipe it off the ground, we're okay. We could actually switch everything over to our Black Creek system and just get all of our water from Black Creek until we have a chance to rebuild. So having the 2 independent well fields, independent groundwater supply sources, makes the New Bern system an extremely resilient system. And it's a very, very good benefit to have, especially in an area like ours, prone to natural disasters, hurricane, tropical events. It's nice to have a backup plan to your backup plan when it comes to water supply. I tell everybody there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. The New Bern water supply just isn't one of them. All right, so that Castlehane water, we're pumping that out of the ground. The Black Creek, let's go back a second. The Black Creek water, we could pump it out of the ground. Literally, we hit it with our disinfectant and it goes to the distribution system. Nothing else is needed. It's great water. The Castlehane water, not so much. It's a lot harder. It's got a lot more dissolved solids in it. So we've got iron, manganese, calcium, things like that we're trying to get out. So all that water has to run through our New Bern water treatment plant prior to putting in the distribution system. So at the treatment plant, we're doing a few things. We're going through oxidation, filtration, softening. We do some chemical addition, and then we get everything ready before we send it out to the customer base. And this is a fairly new facility that we put online in 2010. It's off of Highway 55. If you knew where to look for it, you'd probably see it. It's kind of tucked way back in the field, back in the woods. If you don't know where it's at, that's okay too. We try to keep it kind of out of sight and out of mind. All right, so we get our raw water from our wells, and that picture on the left is one of our production wells from our Castlehane system. Like I said, there's 15 of those. They don't all run at the same time. They do run in different series. That also creates some resiliency for us. So if we were to have an issue with one well or a couple wells, we can take those down for maintenance, take them down for repair. The remaining wells give us what we need to make that, that approximately 2 million gallons a day. Once it hits the plant, we go through some oxidation, aeration and oxidation. What we're trying to do there is get as much of those particles in there, especially the iron. We want this stuff to start rusting. We want bigger particles in the water. The bigger the particle, the easier it is for our filters to catch it. So we're doing some things there with the addition of some chemicals and some oxidation to try to make the particles attach to the filters the best we can. Also helps with odor control. If you ever been around like an old groundwater well, maybe at somebody's farm, or some hydrogen sulfide, kind of rotten egg smell, we get most of that out with the oxidation. That occurs outside the treatment plant. So most of that smell will dissipate and get out of there. You never really notice it in the water. Next, we get into our filter and softener train. This is kind of the bread and butter of our treatment plant. If you ever walk in, we have 2 big treatment trains with softening and filter vessels down both sides. This is a fairly sophisticated, even though it's 16 years old now, still a very sophisticated treatment system. We've got hundreds of monitors throughout that. We're recording flow, we're recording pressure. We have a way to set some parameters in a big computer and big control system, and it will automatically make real-time corrections throughout the treatment train. So it's constantly making minor adjustments to make sure that we've got a very consistent product leaving the door with very little human interaction. So we have operators that set the parameters every day. They're doing checks of the system, doing maintenance, but largely when we turn the plant on and run it, it's making all those minor adjustments by itself. Works very well. So it keeps our operational costs very low, that we have a system that's able to somewhat run itself while it's in operation. So a couple of the questions I get, and probably the main question I get about our treatment plant and the water coming out of the treatment plant revolves around hardness and water hardness. Spots on water glasses, spots on countertops, things like that. Why do we have hard water in New Bern? The short and quick answer is we're a groundwater system. If you're a groundwater system, you're pulling water up that's filtered through all those sedimentation layers. You're going to have some hardness in it. We do the best we can to balance the cost, the chemistry, and the long-term viability of our distribution system in reducing that hardness. So extremely soft water isn't a great thing either. If we pull all the hardness out of the water wants to replace something on a molecular level, in a chemical level. It wants to replace what we've taken out. And as it passes through the distribution system, what it wants to replace that with makes it easier for water, dissolved metals to get into the water. So extremely soft water isn't a great thing. Extremely hard water isn't a great thing either. We try to find a nice balance in there where it's a product that it's suitable for the customer base. It meets some of the cost controls we've got. And also, we want to make sure we're protecting the distribution system by not sending something out there that's going to have an adverse effect with dissolved metals. All right, and lastly, before we send water out of our treatment plant, we have chemical addition, and that's a couple of different things. So for disinfection, we got chlorine and ammonia that make chloramines. We have primary and secondary disinfection. Chloramine's a little safer product to disinfect with than just free chlorine all the time. However, it's not as aggressive as free chlorine. So once a year, during the summer months, we revert back for about a 30 or 45 day window. We'll run the system just on free chlorine. It's a little more aggressive. Make sure we're really burning the system out. It's kind of like shotgun and pull. So during the summer months, you may notice a little higher chlorine smell or a little chlorine taste in the summer months. That's because we've gone from chloramines to free chlorine during that reversion process. We do it every year annually, and that really helps do 2 things. One, it's just a more aggressive disinfectant. Disinfectant kind of gets in every nook and cranny and takes care of anything that may be in there. But we don't want to run that all the time. Running free chlorine all the time has a higher probability of having some unintended consequences with disinfecting byproducts. Yes, sir.
Do you put fluorine in the water? Fluoride?
Great question. We have the luxury of saying we don't add fluoride to the water, but we've got the perfect amount of fluoride in the water. Another benefit of being a groundwater system, we actually have just the right amount of naturally occurring fluoride in the water to be within the range that's recommended by the American Dental Association. We do not add it. I know that's a controversial topic in some places, adding fluoride. It really does nothing for water quality. It's more of a dental hygiene type additive, so we don't add it. However, it's there. It's just naturally occurring. We don't do anything to take it out. But what we have in our naturally occurring groundwater is right in that range for what the ADA recommends. Yes, ma'am. Hold on one sec.
What about nanoplastics?
Good question. Nanoplastics, microplastics. One of the benefits of being a groundwater system is we're not as susceptible to things like microplastics, chemical spills, forever chemicals, really any man-made compound. You have that's a bigger issue in your surface water. So you go to Raleigh, they're pulling water out of Falls Lake. Greenville's pulling water out of the Tar River. Even Kinston, a little west of us, is pulling water out of the Neuse River. It's pretty easy to get something in that surface water source. As I mentioned earlier, that water in those deep aquifers is in the range of 10 to 20,000 years old. So there's nothing down there that was there's no man-made compound that's made it that far down there yet. So one of the huge benefits of being a groundwater system, especially as we talk about man-made contaminants, is we're a lot less susceptible to a man-made contaminant.
So what minerals are left in the water that comes at my tap?
Great question. So we've got a little bit of all that is still left in there. There's still a little iron, there's still a little manganese, there's still a little calcium. Most of what you're seeing, if you see water spots or something like that, that's going to be dissolved calcium or even some dissolved salt, the residuals left in there. There are trace amounts of all of that in there. So that's another good thing about groundwater systems. Some of the minerals that your body needs anyways, you need some of those things. They're all included in a multivitamin. If you take a multivitamin, there's trace amounts of that in New Bern's water as well. It's not empty water. Excellent questions. All right, the last thing we add, and I'll mention it for a sec because it's important a little later on, we add a corrosion inhibitor. It's called potassium permanganate. And what that does is basically build a barrier on the inside of the pipe to prevent corrosion back into the water stream. So this is really, really important for old metallic pipes, which we have a lot of in New Bern. We have a lot of old galvanized, copper, some lead, mostly in homes, but not much in the distribution system. There are some lead pipes still left and lead fittings left in some of the older homes. But there's a lot of galvanized lines in town, a lot of copper plumbing in homes. And what we've been doing by feeding that corrosion inhibitor full time, all the time, you build a barrier inside those pipes, which prevents those metallic pipes from leaching back into the water. So we're basically trying to prevent it the best we can from coming back into the water. And you can see the picture there. There's a couple of examples. The live example there, the two pipes on either end are places where they were running a corrosion inhibitor, and the one in the middle is not. And that's really the main difference. You really prevent all that deterioration from the inside from happening by feeding that corrosion inhibitor. Okay, and lastly, our treatment plan is not the end of the line for our water production. We have to get it to your house or get it to your business, and that's our distribution system. We won't talk much about that tonight, but it is a big part of what we do. A large part of our operational costs and our staff need is those 350 miles of pipeline between the plants and the tanks and your home. That's a 24/7, 365 operation to make sure that stuff's staying functional. When the leaks pop up, we're out there to fix them. And we're making sure that you don't have a water outage. Or if you do have a water outage, it's as small as possible and it's as short as possible. Show of hands, anybody had a water outage lately? That's good. Power outage? All right. Chalk one up for the water guys. All right, so once we leave our treatment plant or we get water in our distribution system, we've left the plant, we know we've got a great product leaving the plant. We don't just turn our back and say, good luck, here it is. We actually do monitoring throughout the system. We have automatic samplers pretty much at every dead end of the system that are continually pulling samples. We'll come around and get those, bring them back to the lab, run tests on those, trying to understand our water quality as it progresses from the treatment plant to the tanks, through the distribution system, to the far reaches of the system. And it varies from day to day. It varies from year to year. Temperature, weather, things like that impact it a little bit. So we do have to make some changes. All that data goes back into what we're doing to turn those dials at the treatment plant to make sure we've got a very good, consistent product, not only leaving the plant, but all the way through the distribution system. And what you ultimately get your home not only meets all of our state and federal requirements, also that it's just a consistent product. We don't want you to have something that's really high in chlorine one day, really no chlorine the other day, smells up and down, set coloration up and down. We want a very consistent product for you day in and day out. The general idea is if you can use your water every day and not really think about it, you just get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you wash your dishes, take a shower, do what you normally do. If you're not thinking about New Bern water, we're doing our job. And so we monitor most of this through an in-house lab. We have 2 state-certified in-house labs in New Bern, one for our water production and one for our wastewater treatment plant. Ms. Kendra Mays in the picture on the right there manages our water treatment plant lab, and she was actually the North Carolina Water Operator Association's 2025 Lab Analyst of the Year. So she does very well at what she does. Yeah. So there's a plethora of regulations that we have to follow. They don't just let you get into the water game. You have state permits, federal permits. They are daily tests, weekly tests, monthly tests, inspections, renewals. It is a highly regulated field. So to be a water system and have actual water customers requires quite a bit of oversight and monitoring. These are things we're doing daily, doing weekly. So don't think that it's just, anybody can get into the water game. It is a highly regulated game. One of the things that you'll see every year we produce is an annual water quality report. It'll come out the end of June, 1st of July. We publish it every year. It's kind of the summary of the prior year's water quality. Through that, it kind of lists what we've done, volumes, any issues we would have had, as well as goes through the required sampling we have to take in the last 12 months, any issue with that sampling, gives you the levels for a couple of dozen out of the 150 or so things that we're looking for, and also gives you some information of where to look if you have additional questions. That's all contained in there. We publish that online every year instead of mailing it out. And there's a link, we run it for about a month or so on everybody's bill that goes out that'll show you where to get to that online if you're interested in diving a little more detail about the water quality on an annual basis. That's just a little more information about that consumer conference report or our annual water quality report. You'll see some things in there. It'll give, like I say, it'll tell you a lot of things will have non-detects or minimum detection limits in there. Like I said, we monitor for over 150 contaminants in our drinking water that is in compliance with all of our state and federal laws. There's just a snippet of what some of that would look like in there. At the top there's the fluoride, and this is from our 2024 data. Chlorine residuals, you see down at the bottom are some things we really don't want in there. It's our trihalomethanes and some of our other disinfectant byproducts. And you see kind of where our levels are and then what the MCL level for most of those are. To my knowledge, I've been here for 20 years, and I was familiar with some of them prior to that. We haven't had anything that's exceeded any of our permit limitations since I've been here. Well within range of any of our regulatory permit limits. Okay, one of the other things I want to touch on briefly is lead and copper. This is something you'll see in the news, mostly in the national news. It's kind of quieted down the last couple of years, but in the last 10 years or so, it's been a pretty predominant theme in water quality as they talk about lead in water, lead in drinking water. Let's say Flint, Michigan, that everybody can kind of nod their head where Flint, Michigan is. So lead and copper has not been a new thing. We've been monitoring and testing for lead and copper in drinking water for quite some time. The issue at Flint, Michigan kind of elevated that on a national stage and got everybody to really pay attention to it. So we've been doing testing and monitoring for well over 30 years for lead and copper. We actually have to identify sites in New Bern. It's getting harder and harder to find houses that would still have plumbing that's, considered, eligible for lead and copper testing. But we find a sample set of those every time we have to do lead and copper sampling. And it's a tedious, we actually go in the house, get the sample from in the house. It's got to be the first draw, and the first time you cut the faucet in the morning. It's a process. But we've been able to do that for quite some time. I've had no issues with lead and copper. Very fortunate where we are just in geography that lead lines were not predominant in North Carolina when lead was being put out. Galvanized service lines were much more utilized. It's just solely based on geography. The lead issue is a much bigger issue. Northeast part of the country and the upper Midwest, you get into Michigan, Ohio, places like that, it's a much bigger issue. They just used more of it back then in those areas. The quick map there just kind of shows you where the predominance of lead lines are. As you can see, North Carolina is in the lowest tier of that, and we average about 8 lead lines, service lines per 1,000 people. In New Bern, I would say it's probably even less than that. We've had a policy of find and replace for the last 40 years. Anytime we encounter one doing any type of other work, it immediately gets a service order, and the next available time we get a crew out there, it gets replaced. I honestly can't tell you the last time we've done one. It's been years since we've found one, and we've had to replace one. So there's not many left in New Bern. It wouldn't surprise me if we find one. They're still out there. I'm sure there's a few rogue ones out there, but there's none that we're aware of.
So I live on Metcalf Street downtown, and about a year ago, everybody got a letter about lead in our water. What the heck was that about then, if you've been testing it all along?
Spectacular question. Man, y'all are like part of the presentation with the questions. All right, the very next slide, right on time. So as the EPA has transitioned from solely testing water, the newest rule is the lead service line inventory, LSLI. This is where they now want to know what's out there. So as part of that, they required every water system to go around and generate a lead service line inventory. We want to know exactly where the lead lines are, how many of them are, how big a problem is lead service lines. So the first phase of that, we basically were able to do a lot with just going through and looking at old records, from construction records we had, from infrastructure construction, home building records when houses were built. There's some things you could just carve completely out due to the date of everything. So everything on the east side of the Trent River, Taberna, Carolina Colors, everything in that, it's all way too new for the lead to be anywhere in there. So you can just say all those we don't have to worry about. We could do that for other places throughout town, and we slowly carved our way down to a subset of about 8,000 homes. We said, we just don't know. The homes are the right age, the water system is the right age. There potentially could be lead lines. So we sent letters to those 8,000 customers and said, hey, as part of this inventory, we've identified yours as an unknown. We're not sure what it is. We can't say for certain what it is. For the vast majority of those, we knew what the city side of that was. From our records, we knew it was either a plastic or a galvanized line. We knew it was non-lead on our side. However, we didn't have plumbing records that showed what it was on the customer side, from the meter to your house. And as part of this lead line service inventory, we not only have to identify what's on the city side of the meter, we also have to know what's on your side of the meter, on the home side. So for most of the unknowns, we actually knew what was in the street and we knew what was going to the meter, but we did not know what was going from the meter to the house. And the home was of the age where lead could have been used, so you got an unknown letter. We were able to go through that. Have you got 2 letters?
No, I just got one.
Okay.
1886. The year my house was built.
One question I've got is PEX and these red and blue plastic lines, do they break down?
I'm sure there's some university level research they're doing on polyethylenes and long-term sustainability of polyethylenes. But right now, as we've evolved from mostly metallic lines, your cast iron, your galvanized, your lead, into the plastic world, polyethylene has been really identified as the long-term sustainable plastic for use. So that's your low-density polyethylenes and your HDPs, your high-density polyethylenes, and the PEX tubing that you see inside your home, that's going to be a high-density polyethylene, HDPE. So at this point, the water industries and the universities have all identified that as the safest alternative for any type of water service, material. Back to the lead line inventory. So everybody we didn't know what that service line was got the letter for the first time in 2024. And over the next 12 months, we kind of worked to go dig through some more records. We whittled that. We got about half of those cut out. We were able to dig through some more records, make some more determinations, and a second round of letters went out this fall in 2025. And now we've got that number down to about 5,000 now. Now we're to the point we've actually got to start looking. So we've actually created a statistical model to analyze everything we've got. And we've got a contractor that's going to start in about a month, going to go through, we've randomly selected a subset of all of those that are left, and we're going to start working through those. So we actually have to go down and dig a little hole on both sides of the meter and visibly identify what that is. And once we're done with that, we'll wrap that up between now and the end of the calendar year. Once we're done with that, we will have no more unknowns. We will know, if we identify a lead, we will know it's a lead. But at that point, everything we've got will know exactly what it is. And at this point, we haven't identified any leads. Not saying we won't come across one or two, but we don't know where any are at this point.
Okay, so you just answered my question, which was no leads have been found.
No leads that are left. So we have found blocks that had lead over the years. This block of this street may have lead on it, or we found a random house here or there. Anytime we encounter lead service lines, like I said, they automatically get scheduled for replacement. So if we're doing something and we have a water leak in the street and we dig down and figure it's a lead service line, even if we're not working on that and we're doing a sewer replacement project or storm drain replacement project and we encounter a lead service line as part of that work, we identify where that's at, what home it's going to, and we go ahead and replace everything up to the meter. We've been doing that for 30 or 40 years.
Okay, but that's on the service side?
Correct.
If it was on the house side, did the people get a letter if it was identified?
They didn't years ago. Years ago, that was not part of the protocol. That's not anything that EPA recommended or really anybody recommended. Today, yes. If we find a lead today or we identify a lead, then there's additional information that will go to the customer, and that's actually the next phase of the EPA program. Once they have these inventories done and they know where all the lead lines are and how big a problem it really is, then they're going to have to come up with a plan of how to replace everything. That's where it gets much more difficult. In New Bern, it's probably not going to be a big deal because I don't think you're going to find very many on the city side or the customer side, just because where we are and the availability of material at the time that stuff went in. We see a lot of galvanized lines on both sides of the meter. Lead just wasn't used much here. It's kind of like a Spanish tile roof. You see a lot of them in Florida. You don't see many of them in New Bern. It's just kind of the same thing.
So when replacement's been done, like from a plumbing standpoint, you have somebody come in and fix the lines from the street to the house, do they report that to you?
So as part of us digging through all the records, we realize sometimes they do. Sometimes there's good information in building permits that we're able to pull that out and say, yep, that's been replaced. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it gets permitted like it should. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we've got some good information we could pull out. We kind of saw a mix of that when we were going through records review as part of the lead service line inventory.
So if someone has information regarding a home, Is there some place you can report it?
There is. We've actually got a website. If you'll go to the city website and you kind of navigate through the water resource side, there is a lead service line inventory page in there. All kinds of good information about the program, what we're doing. There's contact information in there if you know anything about your home in particular. And all this is in the letters too. If you've gotten a letter, all this is in the letters as well. And we've also got an interactive GIS map in there. If you're just curious about what the situation, what the status is at your home, you can go on the map and it'll show you can put in your address and it'll pull up and show you exactly what we know at this point. If you're known, if we know what it is on both sides, if we have an unknown on one side or the other, it'll show you exactly what that is. And I think we've got it down to where we can even say, hey, we know what's on one side, but we don't know what's on the other. We've actually got like a little bubble. I think I got a slide. Right on time. This is actually from our lead service line dashboard. This is online. Anybody can access this. And you'll see there, every house is kind of color coded and there's a little circle in front of each house. It's bisected. So there's opportunity to have color on either side of that. One side represents I think the left side is the city side, the right side is the customer side. So depending on what your color combination that little ball is, will tell you by the legend, hey, do we know, is yours PVC and PVC? Is it unknown and unknown? And you can go through and actually the houses, I think the houses that are blue are ones we know are okay. There's no issue. The ones that are yellow, we don't know. Those are ones that have got some galvanized in there, and because they got galvanized in there, we're not sure what may be on the customer side. Those are some that are going to be the ones that will be checked as we go through doing the visual inspection. Yes, ma'am.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned federal and state regulations, and I think most of us are aware that in the past couple of years, there's been a trend towards deregulation with environmental policies on the federal and state level. And so I'm curious to know what you see and observe about the impact of that locally.
Good question. I will tell you from the water and wastewater standpoint, we see very little deregulation. All of ours keeps climbing up. I can't think of anything in the 25 years or so I've been in the industry that has gone backwards in the way of water or wastewater regulation. We're always looking at what the next thing is. Every permit cycle we come up through, we've got something new we're going to be looking for, either on the water or wastewater side. Lead and copper has been a big one in the drinking water side for several years, and this lead service line stuff is the next layer of that. On the water and wastewater side, the forever chemicals, PFAS, Gen X, things like that is becoming the new frontier for water and wastewater regulations. Before the end of probably the decade, we'll see some regulations on both sides of that. On the drinking water side, they're already there. They're starting to implement some regulations, and we'll probably see some wastewater regulations, I'd imagine, in the next 4 or 5 years.
I just wanted to be clear that if you do find lead on the customer side, it's the customer's dollars that pay for replacing those.
That's a great question. And that's one we don't really have a great answer for. So as part of the EPA's program, what they've required everybody to do is the inventory. I think what they're waiting for is to figure out when the inventories are completely done and they understand how big a problem this really is, next will be how to fund replacement. Because a lot of these, not New Bern, really not in the Southeast US, but you go in the upper Midwest or New England, you're going to see hundreds and thousands of these that are lead on both sides, all the way through. So even if, and these are, it's relatively inexpensive to do this stuff in New Bern, North Carolina. We're digging down waist deep, do some sandy soil. It's not that bad. You go in upper Michigan or Connecticut, that may be 7 or 8 foot deep to get below a frost line. And it's a tremendous excavation. And most of these go into the basements in the homes up north. So it's a much more expensive operation up there. So the funding mechanism is something that we really haven't heard the final idea of how they plan to allocate some money to fund lead service line replacement. Right now, It's just about the discovery part. Let's get an inventory. Let's figure out how big a problem this really is. I think the next step you'll see is, a national plan of how to fund this. Great question, though.
It's my turn, I guess. I've got somewhat of a background in hydrology, and I understand that you're constantly trying to balance supply and demand. And aquifers particularly are very fragile. They can collapse if they're overdrawn, and they don't come back again. It's not like a sponge. They go one direction. Back in July of last year, my wife, Patty Toth, my name's Ed Toth, by the way, Patty gave a presentation before the aldermen about concerns related to AI facilities.
Okay.
And at that time, she's saying, what are they doing? And that's a year ago. So my question to you, two parts to this question. Have you, or the town, or the county particularly, come up with an AI policy on the acceptability? All throughout the country, a lot of cities have said no. And I don't know if we have a policy here or not. And secondly, are there any AI permits before you for a facility to be developed either in New Bern or in Craven County?
Good question. And one important note that New Bern supplies a lot of water in Craven County. We don't supply all the water in Craven County. So there's a couple of water systems in Craven County, the biggest being Craven County Water. To my knowledge, I could be wrong, I don't think we have an AI facility in the New Bern system at this point. And I haven't heard of one on the landscape forthcoming. Through our department review meetings, the meetings we have with the industrial park crowd, the developers, an AI facility is something that hasn't been presented to us yet.
But you have a policy.
Not that specifically prohibits any type of use. However, if it's an out-of-city facility, and imagine just the acreage an AI facility would need, I doubt we have a parcel big enough in the city limits to accommodate one.
It's not a question of size of land, it's a question of consumption.
Sure. So anybody outside the city limits that would like our water or sewer service, they have to enter into a formal water and sewer use agreement prior to us providing service. They identify what their demand's going to be, and then if something we feel like we can accommodate as a provider and something good for the system, we will enter into an agreement to provide that service to us. So if somebody came and wanted to develop 100 acres between here and Pollocksville and needed our water to do that, that would be the policy. We'd stop them at that point. Is the water and sewer use agreement would say, hey, we don't want to provide this much demand for your use. We're not interested.
I'm sorry, I keep going. But if you're weighing people versus AI facilities, we have an expanding growth in our town and in our county. Which is more important, the facility or the people?
Oh, I like the people 100%. And that's, I can't speak for our governing board. That's ultimately who approves those agreements. But like I say, if somebody came today, and I would say that's our safeguard at this point. Nobody's going to show up tomorrow with an AI facility and automatically get granted water supply. They'd have to get approval through our Board of Aldermen through a water and sewer use agreement prior to getting that type of commitment for demand. At that point, it would be up to our aldermen to approve an agreement or not approve an agreement. And if they don't approve the agreement, they don't get our water.
So far, Jordan, it sounds like that our water supply is both safe and adequate. It's kind of refreshing to hear about a program that's not fraught with, difficulty. So that's great. I'm curious, as you look down the road, what you might identify as potential challenges coming to the city of New Bern over the next 5 or 10 years?
Sure. Good question. So, some of the things we're talking about with the lead and copper rules and the emerging rules with man-made compounds, forever chemicals, those are things that concern us. If they get into the point where you're starting to look at any type of emerging contaminant that we haven't looked at before, how do we get that out of the water supply? That could be very expensive. If they find something in groundwater that they haven't been looking for, and it comes up in the next 5 or 10 years, and we have to start getting something out, Not too worried on the water system side. On the wastewater side, I really think it's going to be an issue we're going to have to deal with on the wastewater side with forever chemicals and PFAS. And so in removal at some point in probably the next 5 or 10 years, we'll have to develop a way to remove those. I think it will get regulated. Fortunately, being a groundwater source, the man-made compounds, the forever chemicals are not much of an issue for us with a groundwater source. Just because that water is so deep and it's taken so long to get down there, they're not down there. So if you've got contaminated groundwater with wells as deep as ours, you literally have to have contamination right at the wellhead, and it's running down the side of the wellhead. That's how it would get there. Our wells are scattered through warehouse or timberlands. They're not in industrial sites or industrial areas. So that doesn't concern me much at all. So yeah, from a demand standpoint, we've got plenty of water to meet the growing community. Like I say, I think we could continue growing at the pace we're growing for another 30 years easily without any type of expansion to our water supply. Regulatory changes come with a cost most of the time. Most of the time they're not funded, so they make you bob or weave, and you have to figure out how to pay for that. Honestly, one of the biggest concerns I got, this is more of a business type issue. Everybody uses less water than they did 20 years ago. Great for conserving the resource and conserving everything. When you're in the selling water business, it gets kind of tough. So that's one of our biggest issues as the community has grown over the last 20 years. Believe it or not, we use less water today than we did 20 years ago. Think of all the people that have come to New Bern, all the things that have happened in New Bern in the last 20 years. We're using less water today than we were 20 years ago. How is that possible? Well, it's conservation, both conscious conservation. People just understand all the infomercials about, conserving water. My kids do it all the time. They see the cartoons about cutting the water off while you're brushing teeth, and make sure they're doing that. So those things have resonated with people over a few decades, and they're consciously using less water than they used to. And what I like to call unconscious conservation as well, where just all the plumbing fixtures in your homes, they use substantially less water today than they would have 20 or 30 years ago. So you build a brand new home today, its water demand is a lot less than one that was built in the 80s. And even the ones in the 80s, people have renovated those. You go to Lowe's, you buy a new toilet, new shower fixture, new dishwasher. They all use substantially less water than they used to. So yeah, that's one of the hardest things is we need to sell more water. So I joke about it, but it is a business problem. As our costs continue to rise year after year, our revenues are kind of flat because we're adding customers, but we're selling the same amount of water. So the business side is challenging, but the regulatory side isn't too bad.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out. We're learning more and more every comment that you make. My question really has to do with water pressure. As you head east from the Trent River in the direction of Havelock, you just see new communities left and right, both sides of 70, and there are a lot that you don't even see. There is the footprint of the city of New Bern, which is you. There's James City, there's the county, and lines separating all those various places are known to you, but not to the rest of us. I guess my question is, in time, with all that growth that is happening, we see it happening, will the city and the county, are they the parties that negotiate on building more water towers so there's adequate water pressure for all these houses?
Okay. I can't speak for the county, but for the city, what we do is a lot of hydraulic modeling. We actually have a very complex hydraulic model that we manage in-house. This has got our entire system in it. And anytime we have a new development come and want to add on to the city, let's say you got 100 acres you want to make a housing development out of, we take a look at what the demand's going to be, what improvements are going to need to be made, not only to accommodate the development, but make sure you don't have any substantial impact on the surrounding communities when they add that. So sometimes that's upsizing pipes, sometimes that's making loops in the water system to make sure that you've got enough water to get through everything. But we're checking all that stuff before they ever break ground, before they ever issue a permit for water expansion. We're making sure that our current system can accommodate that growth.
This is adjacent to his question. So according to Strongtown reports, there are a lot of towns where once they start expanding into suburbia, they pay the big upfront cost for the utility expansion, but they often don't take into account the depreciation of that asset. And when it eventually degrades to a point that needs replacement, that's not usually put into city budgets. Do you guys account for that? It sounded like you guys have a plan out to 2070, but is that accounted for?
So the initial capital investment is borne by the developer, whether it be a residential developer, commercial developer. If it takes, $5 million worth of new pipe and, fire hydrants and booster pump, whatever it takes to bring the development online, as well as whatever improvements are needed to the existing infrastructure to make that happen and not impact the community, the developer foots that bill entirely. That gets rolled into the lot cost, into the home cost, however they want to distribute it. But there's no cost to the city for taking that initial upfront cost. Basically, everything else gets the reoccurring maintenance basically gets rolled into an annual rehab budget. We run about $1.5 million worth of rehab money every year, which is going through and replacing lines that are well past their anticipated service life. The good news, I will say, is that most published service lives are very conservative. So, let's say a brand new PVC line with a service life of 50 years. I think we're going to see is those are going to get much more than 50 years out of those. We're still using some, cast iron lines in places that are in very good shape. There's nothing wrong with them, that are over 100 years old. There's not a thing in the world wrong with them. They're actually in some places better than some materials they built in the 80s and 70s and 80s. But yeah, just because you have a published service life of X, we don't instantly go out there and start replacing. We take our available rehab money, distribute it in places where our operators feel like the system is strained the most. And most of that's done with, we also take an advantage of trying to upgrade as we're doing rehab work. So in most cases, we're looking at places to make a more efficient system, provide better water pressure, loops, tie things in as we're doing rehab projects. Very rarely do we just take something out and put something back.
You mentioned the Kinston system, and they must pull from the surface waters for their drinking water?
They do a combination, much like we do. So they've still got some permitted withdrawals in the Cretaceous aquifers, and they're actually a member of NRWASA, the Neuse Regional Water and Sewer Authority. That serves probably half a dozen or 8 systems. They draw out of the Neuse River, and they provide kind of that alternative water to about a half a dozen or 8 other systems. So that was their plan for how to meet that reduction. They became a member of that water association.
But they can still pull a little bit of water off.
They can. Yeah, everybody's got a permitted amount they can still withdraw, and I think most people are still withdrawing that because it's, like I said, it's high quality, low cost water, and then they're using whatever their alternative supply is to make up the difference every day. But yeah, that is a Neuse River source right there west of Kinston. About LaGrange is where they're pulling out of the river.
Yeah, just on that, are there any major differences between the city water system and the county and other water systems?
The city and the county are probably very similar in water source. They've got some Cretaceous wells as well. They've got some newer wells. I think they're pulling out of the PD aquifer, much like our Castle Hayne. It's lower quality water. They're having to run through a treatment plant. They've got a treatment plant on Lewis Farm Road over kind of James City area going towards Havelock. Is their new treatment facility. A little different treatment process. It's a microfiltration or nanofiltration plant they've got versus conventional sand filter like we've got. Aside from that, they're different. It's a different system, different operators, different people. So that water quality, once it leaves the plant, what are they doing with it? How are they monitoring it? I can't speak for them. But there probably are some differences if you're a New Bern customer or a Craven County customer, or you went back and forth, you'd probably notice a little difference because there really are 2 separate supplies.
So geographically, New Bern Water provides water to just New Bern or?
All of New Bern, which includes all the stuff on the other side of Highway 70 that's in the city limits of New Bern. So Taberna, Carolina Colors, Bryce's Crossing, all the developments down Old Airport Road, all the way down to Blue Water Rise, all that's in the city limits. That's all provided by New Bern. Everything else is kind of the older James City area on the other side of Highway 70. That's the Craven County water system. We provide all the water to the town of Trent Woods, everybody that lives in Trent Woods, as well as the Craven County Industrial Park. And then we've got some other customers, probably 1,000 customers out between, we'll say, where Highway 17 kind of runs back into Pollocksville going that way. River Bend, before you get to River Bend, so Rocky Run's what they call it, but that Rocky Run area back to River Bend, we've got about 1,000 customers in there as well.
Any other questions?
Sorry to make you watch so much, Mike.
That's okay.
This is my last one, I promise.
That's okay.
So I'm definitely going to be looking at the that map that you showed earlier. But if you are a yellow house that's still undetermined, does your department offer testing that we can use, either paid or unpaid, where we can send the water to have it tested for lead or other contaminants?
I'll do you one better. Well, actually, there's some contact information there for our lab manager, Ms. Kendra May. She'll actually come out there and pull a sample. If you've got any concern about anything, if it's, I mean, not only that, if you've got just a water quality concern, we'd be more than happy to come out, pull a sample, we'll run it back to the lab, we'll take a look at it, and we can make sure that there, you know, whatever's in there is in there or not in there. So you've got concerns, we can hopefully ease your mind a little bit.
Well, if there's no other questions, I thank you for a great presentation, a lot of great information, and a lot of things that I know a lot of us didn't know. Like, I didn't know that we were using less water than in the past. That's interesting. The Carolina Nature Coalition will do some more of this. Hopefully in the future, we might have a tour of the water facilities there.
Anytime.
And so we will also, we are planning a tour of some of the stormwater facilities at, my mind goes.
Jack Smith Creek.
Well, Jack Smith Creek, we've gone to Jack Smith Creek several times. Duffy Field, the new Duffy Field water, we're hoping to have a tour there and maybe a tour and a cleanup in the Duffy Field area. So, make sure that if you signed in, you will definitely receive things from the Carolina Nature Coalition. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and I hope that you will, if you have a chance, contribute to the Carolina Nature Coalition so we can continue doing these presentations. Thank you.